What do you think of when you picture a private detective? Well, most people jump to an image of a man wearing a long trench coat, holding a pipe, and lurking in a dirty back alley. He sleeps during the day and works at night, and is paid in cash by clients to track someone down or uncover an affair. While this persona is alluring and mysterious, it's one that's been shaped by Hollywood and the media. In reality, this image is a far cry from the field today.
The overwhelming majority of us are hardworking professionals with fascinating backgrounds from the law and from journalism, from accounting, from the labor union community and others who all come together to do this work. And as a former journalist, I understand that many of the stories that make their way onto the front pages of newspapers and podcasts are the ones that feature private eyes who've done something wrong.
That's Tyler Maroney, a former journalist turned private eye, the co-founder of Quest Research and Investigations in New York City, and the author of The Modern Detective: How Corporate Intelligence is Reshaping the World. While most in his line of work try to follow their moral compasses, he admits that there is a dark side to the industry as well.
Probably the most recent big example of this is the story of how a firm called Black Cube was hired by Harvey Weinstein, the former film producer's lawyers, to dig up compromising information on women that he had victimized.
The company, Black Cube, is a secretive international investigations group run by ex-military and intelligence officers with ties to the Israeli government. Mulroney says that Harvey Weinstein enlisted Black Cube and other firms to dig up compromising information on dozens of alleged female victims and the journalists reporting on their stories in an effort to silence them. It's no secret that some of these under-the-radar entities will go to any extreme to satisfy their powerful clientele.
There are many more examples over the years, including private detectives who have paid off friends on the police force to give them private information, or an increasingly growing cadre of hackers who are essentially hired to hack into emails and other sources of data and provide those to their clients. And I would just say quickly that sometimes those people are called private detectives, and I would simply say they're not. They don't deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as the work that we do.
Maroney's firm, Quest Research and Investigations, instead focuses on uncovering fraud, exposing bias, and other nefarious activities. This can mean helping a not-for-profit client with research on climate change, or working with criminal defense lawyers to exonerate a person who's been wrongly convicted of a crime. Last year, QRI made headlines when its investigative work helped free rapper Meek Mill from a never-ending cycle of convictions, probation, and prison for a minor incident that happened back in 2007.
When Meek was put in prison for violating probation, it was such a shock that he was in prison for 2 to 4 years for essentially popping a wheelie on a motorcycle during a video shoot. And it just seemed to us and to other observers that it was such a profoundly horrible way to treat our own citizens. To remove Meek from society for up to 2 to 4 years for a probation violation felt like not the way that we should be structuring our system. But that was the goal down the line, to think through that. The immediate goal, of course, was to find out why this had happened. And we found that in re-examining Meek's case, the police officers who originally arrested him and pushed him through the system leading to his conviction had engaged in some wrongdoing. So we were able to take a look at this entire proceeding, which lasted 10 years, from arrest to conviction to appeals to probation to imprisonment again, and examine the entire criminal justice system through Meek's case using the skills of a private investigator.
And these skills are widely applicable. Most of the cases Maroney and his team of investigators handle are in a corporate setting. It can mean working with a company to help them vet the executives of a business they want to acquire, or as an outside third party looking into possible internal fraud. Maroney points out that while not every case is high profile, like with Meek Mill, any of these investigations can take hundreds of hours of interviewing people and combing through online documents.
There's a chapter in my book that I call Due Diligence, in which we are hired by a private equity firm that wants to buy another company, a portfolio company. But before they buy this company, they want to know more about the people who run the company, their credibility, their background, their integrity, and if they have been involved in any kind of activity that would give our client pause. And in fact, in this case, we found enough information to persuade our client to not move forward with the acquisition, because we found out that the person on whom we were conducting a background check had lied about his name and had been involved in a fraud that he had tried to cover up previously. And that's not spying, that's doing research, and that's talking to the right people who we know had the answer. In this case, we actually went to a prison to talk to a former colleague of the person we were investigating who had been convicted and was willing to discuss the details with us. And I make this point that this work helps companies avoid fraud and helps them avoid wrongdoing and make the right decisions so that they can grow.
And it's not just financial corporations that need this extra layer of transparency. With our large reliance on technology today, the amount of disinformation online is overwhelming, and sometimes it takes a trained eye to sort through what's fake and what's not.
Since nearly all of us at this point consume our news by looking at our phones, we don't often know the source of that information. And not just the source, meaning the news outlet, but the author and then the information within the article. So one of the roles we play is to track that information from, say, a single posting on Twitter 6 weeks ago by what turns out to be a bot, so not a real person, and then that information being picked up by news aggregators and then amplified by the mainstream media. So you see this spread of information that most people are unaware of because they don't have the time and the resources to think through it. All they know is that they're clicking on a link on their phone and they're reading a story.
Obviously, investigators like Maroney can't catch every fake posting on Twitter or Facebook. He argues that it's a losing battle until governments and social media companies make it a bigger priority to tackle these cyber campaigns that spread like wildfire.
If companies have the tools internally and working with investigators like us to identify that information and to unmask it, sometimes I admit it feels like a game of whack-a-mole because there's always somebody following behind to engage in the same kind of behavior. But it helps bring transparency to the system and make people feel more comfortable engaging in the business without worrying that they're going to be victimized by a Twitter bot.
The rise of social media and the internet has been a blessing and a curse. It's connected people across the globe, but has also fostered a platform for illegal activities.
Look at the dark web, right, which is a corner of the internet that is not searchable and where there is a lot of nefarious activity going on, to the rise of cryptocurrencies that operate and exist completely outside of any regulatory framework, meaning the government doesn't have any oversight over what they do. That's changing slightly these days. But I think the biggest challenge is keeping up with that technological innovation.
Maroney says that each person, whether they're a private detective or not, should do some research on the information they're absorbing. What are its origins? Who is the original source? Is it outwardly biased? This way of thinking, coupled with the ability to investigate deeper, is what future generations should cultivate early on in order to be a cognizant citizen.
It's a reason to advocate even more strongly for STEM programs, for example. I studied history when I was in college, and so I was pretty good at reading and writing, which allowed me to get a job in journalism. But the more work that I do as a private detective for companies that are built on engineering ingenuity or science or other technologies that I'm not familiar with, the more I want to learn about those fields, because it makes me better at my job to understand where my clients come from. And if people can take away from my book the lesson, not just that private detectives play a crucial role, but that learning information about who you work with and where you operate and the importance of technology and science and doing work to benefit the public interest, then I've succeeded in some respects.
If you're interested in learning more about the work of a private detective, the growing field, and our guest Tyler Maroney, visit viewpointsradio.org. His book, The Modern Detective: How Corporate Intelligence is Reshaping the World is available online now. For more behind the scenes, check out Viewpoints Radio on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price.
Nearly 18 million people in the United States have atopic dermatitis, also known as eczema. Eczema can happen almost anywhere on the skin, including the face, neck, and arms, but it can appear differently for everyone. Mom, author, singer, and fashion designer Jessica Simpson talks about her mild to moderate eczema for the first time.
As a kid, I first noticed eczema on the back of my arms and legs. I would cover up my skin because I felt self-conscious anytime I was experiencing an eczema flare. I've tried to manage my eczema over the years with various over-the-counter lotions and creams, but it got much worse during my last pregnancy. As a busy working mom of 3, I don't always have time to focus on my eczema, so I finally talked to my doctor and was prescribed Eucrisa. I'm happy to say that my eczema improves when I use it. I truly encourage patients and caregivers to have the eczema conversation and talk to their doctor about potential treatment options that may be right for them.
Jessica has been using Eucrisa Crisaborole Ointment 2%, the first and only 100% steroid-free prescription ointment for the treatment of mild to moderate eczema in patients as young as 3 months old. Eucrisa works both at and below the skin surface to treat eczema. The specific way Eucrisa works is not well defined. Prescription Eucrisa is for topical use only in patients 3 months of age and older. Do not use Eucrisa if you are allergic to crisaborole or any of the ingredients in Eucrisa. Allergic reactions may occur at or near the application site. These can be serious and may include hives, itching, swelling, and redness. The most common side effect is application site pain, such as burning or stinging. Eucrisa is for use on skin, topical use only. Do not use Eucrisa in your eyes, mouth, or vagina. Ask your doctor about Eucrisa. Learn more at eucrisa.com or by calling 1-866-EUCRISA. Again, that's EUCRISA.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
One side will say, listen, people make a decision to come here illegally. What expectations should people have? What rights do they have?
The 12 million undocumented immigrants who call the U.S. home. Then,
when he said that on national television, look, my hair was on fire because that's not an element that the government has to prove.
The disparities when it comes to prosecuting white-collar crime. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.